Hello and welcome to Geek Warning, brought to you by the Escape Collective. I'm your host, Dave Rome, and I'm joined today by Ronan. Ronan, how you doing?
I'm good. Yeah, I'm good.
Good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Not sure if I'm telling you or telling myself, but I'm good.
Yeah, okay. You can tell us both, because it's just the two of us,
Yes.
And all the listeners. James is... I'm going to throw him under the bus here. James is in Toronto, Canada, reshooting some factory tours that he had already shot maybe a month ago. And yeah, he was being diligent, doing his work on the flight home, and left his memory card and his USB hub on the plane without a backup. So he had to go back and photograph the whole tour again. So, but anyway, there's some cool factory tours coming, and I'm sure the photos will be even better with him having done them in a second time. So,
Well, let's hope the USB hub makes it home this time.
Yep. There's also going to be some special podcasts coming from that trip of his. So, we've got some Bridgeworks bikes and Frameworks Designs, two makers in the space there doing really, really creative things in their own ways. And I think he's going to have some deep dive podcasts with each of them, which will be published on our members only Geek Warning feed. So if you're not already a Escape Collective member, you will get the tease of those episodes, but you'll only get the whole thing if you're a member, just like Ronan's performance process. That was where I was throwing to you to explain what performance process was.
Well, performance process, for anybody who doesn't know, is the podcast where we delve into all the performances that go into the best performances that we see. You kind of throw me on the spot here. I'm thinking back to when we launched the podcast and trying to think exactly what it was about. Perhaps I should just tease this week's episode, which is a follow-up to our Pit Walk podcast with JP Ballard. That, not to spoil the illusion or anything, was recorded before we did that Pit Walk podcast. So it's the follow-up that was pre-recorded. Here's one we made earlier.
Prequel.
With JP Ballard. It's the 3-hour episode I've been ranting on about over and over again. We're gonna split into a couple of episodes. Part of it will land this Friday.
And unlike the Star Wars prequels, this one is actually better than the original.
I think they're all equally good. Not really a big Star Wars fan. You kind of got me there. I know that, the last ones came before the first ones, which does match what's happening here with the JP Ballard podcast.
Yep.
So.
All right, let's move on. We've got a bunch of news to talk about today. We've also got...
Before I get hated, I don't mind
lately.
Star Wars. I just I'm not like, it's a long time since I've watched them.
Don't worry, I wouldn't worry about it. Wade doesn't listen to this podcast. You'll be fine. Anyway... Got a full episode this week. A lot of news to talk about, mainly around some pretty interesting things. There's a recall in there. There's a way to add a UDH to specialized dropbar bikes that aren't UDH compatible. There's a new cyclocross specific bike. We've got an update on some fancy pedals that we previously spoke about. We're also going to talk about what we've been testing. And of course, we've got the PSA and a little bit of a wrap up from industry news. Ronan, let's jump into some of the bigger headline news of the week. You sent me a link to Tubolite, who are known for making some of the lightest tire inserts in the market. They're popular in the mountain bike world, but they've got a new model called the Diamana, and you just asked, please explain, with exclamation marks. So can you introduce what we're talking about here?
Yes, this is the new Diamana SL and Diamana HD inserts for cross-country tires, from what I understand, from Tubolite. And the thing that caught my eye about these was some of the messaging about them. They first popped up on Tubolite's Instagram. I followed the link to their page, and immediately met with the huge big headline, unfair advantage. This is where why can't I read this? I think I can't read this because it's something lost in translation. This were the words of our pro riders, so that's why I can't read it. Yes, sorry. I thought I was going crazy there. Basically, the part that really caught my eye was the mention of the lateral channels, which are shaped to create a venturi effect, meaning that airflow through the channel increases speed as channels get smaller. This is the same principle of Formula 1 cars' ground effect. And effectively what Tubolite are claiming here is that they have incorporated aerodynamics to inside the tyre, from what I can understand. I can't quite understand it though, so that's why I asked for someone to please explain.
Yeah. So when you're looking at these inserts are normally like a piece of foam of a consistent shape that sort of surrounds the rim and sits inside the tire. These are kind of like this weird sort of wavy shape that
do like the petals of a flower, almost that kind of shape, aren't they?
Yeah, petals of a flower, or like the stacked dimes of a weld in a sense, and they sort of go in and out in shape. And to me, it kind of seems a bit funny because it's an insert, but there looks to be like vulnerable points in the shape where, like, if you're tight, like, you know, that parts of the rim might be more exposed than other parts.
They're also I almost said they're also rubbed for extra pleasure. I meant to say they're also dimpled. It's been a long day. It's been a very long day. They're also dimpled.
Yeah, right. Okay, yeah. They're saying dimpled like the surface of a golf ball for, again, aerodynamic properties. Ronan, is this the first time you've come across aerodynamic claims that are hidden from the wind of outside?
Yes, I mean, like, as we all know, in almost all cases there is air inside our tires. Someone's gone badly wrong if there isn't, unless you've got a solid tire. And so, I mean, yeah, I can't say that aerodynamics are not at play, but this is the first time I've seen aerodynamics or the claimed benefits of improved aerodynamics on a bicycle hidden inside some part of that bicycle, and not immediately evident how those aerodynamics are at play. I will also say that while I am not an aerodynamicist, it is also definitely the first time that, you know, I certainly couldn't come up with some of the aerodynamic interventions that we see in bicycle designs these days, but when it is explained to me how it works, I think I'm usually sort of somewhat decent at picking up and understanding how the claims are working, at least. And I just can't for the life of me figure this out.
Yeah, so I mean, what they're claiming is that they're at the point of impact, say you hit a square edge root or rock as the tire compresses, the shape of this insert is allowing the air to more freely flow away from that point of impact. So it gets absorbed better. Probably in the case of these mountain bikes, it gets absorbed more quickly and therefore before the suspension can even react. That's basically what they're trying to do. Whether it actually does that, I don't know. I'm going to say sure. Let's see how well this plays out. But I think what is interesting is that Tubolite, not to be confused with Tubolito, who make the orange TPU inner tubes, Tubolite, which is this insert company out of Italy, their whole brand name comes from the fact of having the lightest inserts. They offer inserts that are 20, 25 grams, 30 grams sort of space, where a lot of their competitors are in the 150 to 250 weight range. But this new Venturi effect style insert is 100 plus grams. And they do have models that are heavier again. So it's using a closed cell foam that is much more similar to the likes of Cushcore. So yeah, it's kind of interesting for this brand to release something that's quite different to its initial brand purpose and to try innovate in a space that's already pretty well established. So time will tell if it's something you could even pick up on. Yeah,
there's also claimed rolling resistance improvements. I think the claim is that rolling resistance on rough surfaces is reduced up to 9%, which seems
compared to what?
Yeah, that like 9%. Yeah, that's a big number. And like in terms of the compression and the rebound and all that part I sort of got. What's really throwing me out was the cross section view of this, where yes, there's a central channel where presumably air can flow through, but from what I can see in this cross section, the insert, is sort of closes off whatever other channels there may be for the air to flow through, and that's where I'm just not really, it seals against the tire, and yeah, I just finding this one difficult to fathom. Yep.
Anyway, we'll see how it plays out. I'm sure. I can't say we've got any coming in for test, but it'll be interesting to see whether.
I'm not sure if we were clear about the dimples also, in that the dimpled surface, the dimples on the upper portion of the insert, which Tubolite have said take inspiration from dimples on a golf ball, which I mean is fairly the dimples have been used for aerodynamic purposes, mostly on golf balls, also on zip wheels, other things. But together with the insert's wave shape, they help air not to bounce back to the tire, causing a strong rebound effect, but rather to flow into the lateral channels, which I am not in a position to say that isn't going to happen, but I can't see that works inside a tire.
All right. Well, yeah. Let's see how this plays out in the market. Is an interesting
looks cool
release. Yeah, it looks cool, but no one's going to see it. So anyway,
not even the wind.
No. Ronan, what's happening with the Ekoi pedals? We spoke about these on last week's episode. They're, I guess, best described as a very elongated pedal system where the cleat appears to be built into the shoe sole of some kind. And they were getting some race use. So what's happened now?
Those Ekoi pedals were in the news last week, successfully broke the internet with their new look and the claims or the suggested 8-watt benefit that they offer. In the news again this week because when Team Nice Metropole Côte d'Azur tried to take to the start line for stage 1 of the Étoile de Bessèges stage race in France, UCI commissaires on site intervened to tell the team, no can do. Those pedals are prototypes and have not been listed in the correct manner with the UCI for use as prototypes in UCI sanctioned events, and as such you cannot use these pedals in today's race. And unfortunately they told the team this within 1 hour of the start of the stage, which when you consider that these pedals require a proprietary sole design on the shoe, meant that the riders who were like not near their hotel and presumably didn't have other shoes at the hotel anyway couldn't just rush back and pick up new shoes and pedals from their own supplies, so then had to go around other teams and shops in sort of the locality to try and find pedals and shoes to start the race. A friend of ours, matosfellow.fr, was on site, witnessed this all happen, has reported the whole event on his website, matosfellow.fr. And so sort of broke this news. That's and then wild. A lot of other sites have seen this and picked up on it. I want to intervene here, much like the UCI did, and sort of the initial reaction is, damn, UCI intervening again, and why are they being so silly? In this case, I don't actually think they were. I mean, like it or loathe it, agree with it or not, the rules are actually pretty clear now on the use of prototypes, and the requirement to fill out the prototype application form has been effective since January of last year. Most manufacturers at this point should be aware of it. I presume this is perhaps the first time Ekoi have had to use a prototype since then. And from what I understand, they did actually follow the procedure. They did submit the form. They just hadn't done it on time. And as such, the UCI then, well, I mean, the pedals, they haven't been registered through the correct channels for use as a prototype. And I mean, the UCI definitely could have handled it better than letting the team know an hour before the start of the stage. But
yeah, that's powerful.
Yeah, especially when you consider that they were used 3 days earlier. Probably an oversight there. The commissaire can't be expected to be checking people's pedals on site, but it was in all the news for about 2 days after that.
Yeah,
there surely should have been time to let them know, and if there wasn't, presumably there should have been some sort of dispensation to say, okay, 24 hours from now we have a second stage starting, you can't use them for that stage. I mean, just forcing riders to start with new pedals, new cleats, new shoes that they haven't the time to set up as a recipe for injury, as far as I can.
Yeah, that's my point. It's like, yeah, change of pedal system and change of shoes completely changes your bike fit, and getting them to do that, yeah, an hour before certainly isn't enough time to adjust the bike fit around that. So you're basically forcing riders to adopt a position they're not trained in. So
it wasn't handled all that well, but certainly the initial fault here, I don't think is with the UCI in this case. The rules are pretty clear, and the rule in question is, it's the commercialization rule, Article 1.3.006, which it clearly states there's actually one line of the first line of that rule is all that's required to tell you what that rule is all about. It's basically that you cannot use products that are not available to order in professional races. Things have to be commercially available. The next 5 paragraphs or so are just all about the different scenarios around prototypes and how prototypes can be used. And the only actual outright ban on the use of any sort of prototypes is in track record attempts. So like Filippo Ganna's Our Record was the last record attempt you could actually use a prototype component within. And from now there's this new application form, there's a fee to pay, but everything is clearly listed on there. Everything from frame, fork and handlebar modules to right down to helmets, pedals, shoes, everything is listed there. So it's,
they should have seen this coming.
I mean, yeah, Ekoi as a helmet brand, especially, like and from what I understand, they were aware, they just hadn't submitted the documents in time. But it's sort of, I have a piece about to publish on escapecollective.com, sort of delving into this in more detail, and it's sort of, yeah, I mean, the fact that the UCI are getting involved in it, they want to see prototype pedals registered with them. I mean, is that sort of overstepping the mark with how far they should be governing the sport? I'm sure they think not. Others will think it is. I think the gist of my entire piece is that actually this just highlights the greater issue happening here in terms of commercialization, in terms of the Ekoi pedals might be the headline piece this week, but last week we had a $7,000 skinsuit from ASOS. The week before that we had a $60,000 track bike from Factor. Those prices, they only exist because of the Ekoi, or because of the commercialization rule, and the manufacturers and the teams developing this stuff for the Olympics cannot make these components exclusively for themselves. So what they do is they price them to make them exclusive in every sense, but actually being exclusive. Nobody's going out and buying 60,000.
I'd say the first time we ever saw that was probably like Hansino shoes with Adam Hansen footwear that he would use himself. And yeah, we've certainly seen it from other GB track team and others since. So
it used to be that, like, if I think back to the UK sport GB team bikes at the Olympics and that, they were like the commercialization rule, I think, was introduced in 2010, and then for 2012 the GB team had said, well, you can order this thing, there's just a very lengthy waiting list. And I think if you had ordered one back then, you'd still be waiting today for your frame to turn up. Spoiler alert, it's not coming. But the UCI sort of sidestepped that loophole by making it mandatory that items must be available within 12 months. There's exceptions to that. Like we've seen countless bits of prototype equipment introduced into the World Tour that hasn't actually been available within 12 months, and
that's just typical Kickstarter timelines.
We've never seen anybody like expunge from the results because they used, I don't know, wet weather tires that never actually made it to the market or something like that. That's that hasn't happened. But maybe that's what it takes. And again, going back to my piece, what I'm sort of diving into is just that the UCI is kind of on a hiding to nothing here. They're damned if they do and they're damned if they don't, and that they kind of, I think the reasons for the commercialization rule are admirable, but the reality is that it's just not really enforceable, and this is trying to get the tech genie back into the bottle, and he's refusing to go back into the bottle.
Fair enough.
And finally, just on the prototype rule, it kind of just makes the UCI they've retained this avenue for registering prototypes, but they've said that the only prototypes that can be approved are ones that are in the quotation marks here, in the final stages of development, close quotations, and also must be available to purchase within 12 months. And that to me is not a prototype. That is a product that is pretty much ready to launch. And as such,
that's a pre-production product.
Yeah. And as such, the prototype testing within the World Tour Peloton now is not testing things at the highest level in cycling. It's just an early marketing stunt or marketing exercise. Not a stunt, an exercise, sorry. And that, manufacturers will have a new product show up in a World Tour Peloton, and it's not testing it. It's just like, getting some excitement built about it before the launch. Yeah.
All right. Well, I don't think we're going to solve that one, but it is definitely an interesting one. And hopefully we see those pedals make a return.
And that's sort of what I wanted to get to as well, is that the reporting about this is that the pedals have been banned. And from what I understand, the pedals are not banned. They simply were not registered as prototypes. There doesn't seem to be any reason why they will not be approved in future. And the initial reaction of, the UCI don't like the look of them, so they banned them, isn't accurate either. That's it's probably important to say that.
Gotcha. Speaking of UCI things, there's a new bike that's UCI approved, the Ridley X-Night. So it's a new cyclocross specific bike, which is something we don't see too often. But yeah, I'll give the quick summary, and then I'm going to ask you a question about this, Ronan. But it's only available in 4 sizes. It has aerodynamic features, including integrated cable routing through the front end. There's a UDH, a universal derailleur hanger at the back for use with transmission if you want it. And the seat post isn't round. It's D-shape, where, again, they're claiming some aerodynamic benefit, but the main reason seems to be that if you go all Wout van Aert on your bike and you kick your saddle, that the seat post doesn't swivel. It just holds straight. So, but yeah, Ronan, aerodynamic cyclocross bikes, is this the first that's making that claim? I know Cervelo have their R5CX, which kind of looks a bit aerodynamic and is integrated cabling, but I don't know. I'm not aware of other brands that have claimed to have full aero CX bikes.
I don't think it's the first. There aren't all that many. I think the Panarello Crossista F might well be in that category also. And then there are other, of which the existing Ridley X-Night, I think, was one, of bikes that have internal cable routing. But as we were sort of saying here before we hit record, at this point, and don't come through the screen at me now, Dave, when I say this, but I think I'm right in saying at this point, the internal cable routing is no longer an aero intervention. It is purely an aesthetics thing.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think...
No arguments there.
Yeah, I think most people who want internal cable routing probably want it for that reason, that it just looks so much cleaner at the front end.
Yeah. I think in CX that there's an argument for where you don't have cables to snag. Like everything is hidden, but the downside is the CX is the one sport where your bike's going to get pressure washed while you're using it, and then again afterwards. So I think, just for if they've gone to the effort of really sealing this, then great. But I don't actually think there's any bike on the market that is sealed that well, where those headset bearings aren't going to get screwed within half a season.
And for anybody listening to the podcast who doesn't watch cyclocross, they're not power hosing the riders as they ride by. The riders have many bikes on site at a race that they change between races.
Sorry, the bikes are getting pressure washed. Well,
my point was going to be is that there are multiple headsets per lap being destroyed.
Yes,
not just one. But I mean, going back to your initial question, aerodynamic cross bikes. I was quickly trying to Google what the sort of average speeds were for...
They go pretty quick.
I mean, from what I understand, it could be up to like 32k an hour or something. And I think the important thing to remember here is that regardless of what speed they're doing, any aerodynamic aid is not going to hurt them. It may offer some help, it may offer no help, but it's not really going to hurt unless it adds some exorbitant amount of weight that the rider's then going to have to shoulder as they're running through the course or whatever, or if it's some sort of design element that just retains mud on the frame, that's not going to help. But if everything else being equal, having a more aerodynamic cyclocross bike is not going to hurt performance. And in this case, in the case of the Ridley, I think the result is just a damn good looking cross bike also, which I kind of like.
It does look very nice. Information's pretty lacking in the press release. I don't know, tire clearance, for example. It looks pretty generous above the tire, but I'm not sure about absolute width availability. Certainly they've designing this one really for racing in mind. So they've still got their Hanzo gravel bike for people that want larger tires again with gravel geometry, but yeah, it's cool. Like there's not too many purpose-built cyclocross bikes on the market, so it's nice to see a new one, even if it's gonna continue to make Shimano's brake hose shortage a problem.
Wasn't aware of a brake hose shortage. That's but I should have been.
It seems whenever I need a brake hose, I struggle to get access, and I think you ran into that issue recently.
I mean, that's
what
I was going to say. I should have been aware of said shortage because when I tried to secure road hoses recently, there were only mountain bike hoses available.
And the ones on your bike were experiencing a shortage themselves.
They were, they were shortened to match the dropped stem position. And I'm
not convinced that Shimano around the world, like all the different offices of Shimano around the world, have really done the forecasting. I think they've been caught off guard by how many headset repairs are causing hose sales. And I think it just wasn't necessarily on their forecasts based on how often these things are out of stock at the moment.
And to be clear, the mountain bike hose will work on a roll lever if you use the right olive and barb. Just the compression might not be the same. Isn't that correct? Yeah. Or the pressure might not be the same, isn't that? No?
Internal diameter, I believe, is different.
So you sort of you lose a bit of brake pressure is what I'm...
Yeah, so you're talking about a BH59 versus a
BH91.
BH90 hose, which do use different olive and barbs, but they use different barbs. I think the olives are the same. But anyway, the BH90 is the one to go for. That is also used on the mountain bikes. It's just the BH59 is like the older, cheaper hose these days. Okay. Anyway, this isn't an Ask a Wrench episode, so we'll stop talking about brake hoses.
What was the point I was going to get to there? The point I was going to get to was that I am pleasantly surprised, and part of why I was keen to include this in the news roundup was that there has been a trend this cyclocross season of riders riding gravel bikes and in cross, and it's more often than not in cases where a supplier perhaps doesn't have a cyclocross bike. The Willier Rave SLR was used. I think it was Lewis Askey of Groupama FDJ had used one of those, but Willier don't make a cyclocross bike, so that makes sense. There was a couple of others that are escaping my mind right now, and of course Wout van Aert had used a Cervelo Aspro instead of a R5 CX for Zolder, I think it was. And so I thought that was perhaps the beginning of a trend, the disappearance of cyclocross bikes. And I'm still not convinced that it's not. If any brand was going to release a brand new dedicated cyclocross bike, it probably was going to be Ridley, but it's good to see.
Yep.
And one other note about it, they've made some functional concessions compared to a traditional cyclocross bike in that it has 2 bottle cage mounts, which you wouldn't traditionally have got. So,
wow, all the hydration for when you're training. Kind of on the topic of brakes, SRAM had previously released a stop sale notice for all of its 12-speed drop bar shifters. So that's basically everything in the access range and also Apex mechanical. The idea of the stop sale was any shops that had stock of the shifters not installed on a bike needed to swap out the bolt. The bolt had, from factory, too much thread locker applied, and that would then limit the clamping force for a given torque. So say you tighten it to 6 Newton meters, it would probably only clamp the effective of say 4 Newton meters. I'm making up those numbers, but that's kind of what we're talking about here. So they replaced those bolts, but now SRAM have issued a full recall of those brake levers, but it's not a recall that you'd expect. The recall is basically just a way to get word out to warn people that have these aftermarket sold levers. So apparently this doesn't affect those that came stock on a complete bicycle sold by a bike shop. But yeah, just aftermarket levers that, you can basically undo and retighten and undo and retighten and undo and retighten the bolt on your shifter in order to wear away that thread locker, and then your shifters now pass the recall. It's a weird one.
Can I interrupt you now and just say this is not a recall? It's not even a recall issue. This is just...
Well, tell that to the consumer authorities at calling it a recall, but it's...
It's not a recall issue.
They've gone through recall channels in order to I guess protect themselves in the US, and people are litigious for weird reasons. But yeah, a very simple one, this one, and it's unusual to see a recall where the safety notice is basically if you're comfortable to do so, just undo the bolt and redo it a few times, and you'll be great.
Can I undo some of their hard work and say that if you see a clickbaity headline, SRAM recall this week. You don't, now, if you're listening to this in the future, I don't know what recalls are going to happen in the future. So if you see a recall notice in the future, by all means, treat it with the greatest of respect and adhere to whatever they say. But if you see one today, as you're listening to this, as we're recording it yesterday, it's not that big a deal.
Yeah. I think we might be the only outlet that hasn't covered this on the website, but. Yeah, so officially you're meant to undo the bolt. I think it's 2 full turns, redo it up to 6 Newton meters, and then repeat that, and then you can then repeat that process doing 3 full turns undone, and then back up to 6 Newton meters. Repeat 3-4 times. They're a bit vague on exactly how many times you need to do it, but basically until you feel the resistance in the bolt loosen. I have experienced this issue with SRAM shifters before, and it's a pretty simple fix to overcome this. But yeah, just check that your shifters aren't moving on the handlebar.
Is it a worthy pun to say use your common sense?
What?
Your common sense? Your common sense? Loctite?
I don't
know.
I don't.
Okay.
I have no words.
When I have to explain it, I've lost.
On that embarrassment,
what I was going to say
on.
was actually what I always find fascinating about any of these recalls is just the nuance of, the pre-installed levers are not affected, but the aftermarket ones are. And I just, not saying we should delve into this right now, just saying I always find how what a seemingly identical component can end up, presumably comes from different factory or something like that, whatever, yeah.
I can only assume the hardware is different, that they're using a different thread locker at the assembly factories versus a much more hardened Teflon-like thread locker in the aftermarket shifters. But that is wild speculation.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Anyway, let's move on before we have to recall that. Last on the headline news for us, 5Dev, which is a company sort of best known for their CNC machine cranksets, they've been getting a bit tricky with making some new dropouts for frames with a large center hole at the rear derailleur hanger. They've been converting a few of these frames for UDH compatibility, so you could then fit T-type SRAM derailleurs to these frames that you wouldn't expect a T-type derailleur to fit. So they had one for Yeti. Oddly enough, that page on their website is now broken, but what has popped up since then is one for Specialized dropbar bikes. So specifically, the current Crux and Roubaix, they've got some kind of hanger adapter, or some sort of adapter system that lets you turn that frame into a UDH and then mount a standard T-type derailleur onto it. So pretty cool mod. I will say, though, that it's an interesting way they're selling it. Currently, you actually have to buy the derailleur through them. So it's $1,500 to do this through 5Dev. I'm not entirely sure why they're not just selling the one part that they're actually making. But hopefully we can get some clarity on that. But I like this. I like seeing some sort of, some brands figuring out ways to adapt components that shouldn't otherwise be compatible. So it's a a good one to watch for. And yeah, I think hopefully this becomes more of a trend, as there are quite a lot of bikes on the market that aren't compatible with the way SRAM is going with its drivetrains. And yeah, if a frame out there has a large enough center hole, then perhaps it too can be adapted. All right, let's take a short break with a word from our sponsor, which is us. This episode and every episode of the Geek Warning podcast is brought to you by Escape Collective. And
You mean it's not Athletic Greens?
It's not Athletics Greens.
Okay.
It's not Bone Broth.
Okay.
It's not Manscape. What are the other generic go-to podcast advertisers? It's us. So we are wholly funded by memberships and subscribers, and this podcast exists solely through that. So if you are a member, thank you. Thank you for making this content exist. Thank you for keeping us gainfully employed and trusting us to keep you informed and entertained. But if you're not a member, then please consider becoming one, because this podcast will only continue with your support, and everything we do requires the support from the community that enjoys the content.
The cost-saving measures while we're trying to recruit new members have gone to extreme lengths now, in that I am cutting my own hair. So for the sake of when we do eventually make it into video, that for the sake of all the viewers, then if we could get to a point where I can afford haircuts again, that would be great.
Yeah. All right. Let's return to the episode. A new segment name of an old thing we've discussed before. I'm just going to call it testing. Ronan,
are you videoing my name suggestion? Testy McTesters.
What's your name suggestion?
Testy McTesters.
Testing McTesters.
Or Testy McTestface. No.
That failed testing.
Okay.
So we're not going to go with that. Yep.
Okay.
Ronan, are you warm at the moment?
Yes, I was on a ride today reviewing a new piece of clothing that I have, and I realized mid-ride that if we pluralize the name of this piece of kit, you might get an accurate description of how many listeners might feel about an £808 sterling winter thermal skinsuit, which is named it's the Q36.5 thermobolic winter skinsuit. And it just kind of struck me mid-ride that if it was called the Thermobolics, a lot of people might take that name. They might latch on to that name, let's say.
Yeah. This thing looks like a wetsuit. What's going on?
I've sort of taken the mickey a bit there. But this is actually a heck of an impressive piece of kit from Q36.5. It's a thermal winter skin suit, sort of fleece lined, as you might imagine. And as you might imagine, a skin suit, it is a one-piece, whole body piece of kit. It's thermal tights and thermal jacket combined into one piece to make a thermal winter skin suit.
Is it a skin suit for aerodynamic purposes, or is it a skin suit for being able to quickly get into the shower after you've had your ride?
Well, it has like a race fit or a figure hugging fit or whatever you might want to call it, an aerodynamic like fit. But the sort of the main claim around the benefits of deciding to make it a skin suit is that in combining these two typically separate pieces of kit, a winter tights and winter jacket, into one, you can eliminate some of the sort of heat loss through the different layers by effectively trapping them into one layer, if that makes sense.
And you're so aerodynamic, the cold wind can't stick to you.
To read straight off their website, the skinsuit works to minimize the loss of warmth between the layers while offering a race fit without sacrificing effective insulation. I don't know if you remember, a couple of years ago I reviewed the ASOS Yoda jacket, which was, this very much fits into the same category. That ASOS Yoda jacket was like £500 and something, if I remember correctly, and being that expensive, you just wanted to be able to hate it. And it was frustratingly good. And and this is frustratingly so much better again than the ASOS jacket.
Well, the saying in the world is the rich only get richer, and clearly the rich also stay warm.
The rich have thermobolics.
Yep. All right. It's also got a pouch, doesn't it? It's got a pocket at the front with like a...
So that's, I mean...
a parachute?
I will say I do have a couple of issues with it. Primarily the fact that it's all black for use in dark, cold conditions. I can just never get behind that. It's always a major issue for me with winter clothing and rain clothing in general. The other sort of glaringly obvious problem with making a winter skin suit is that, and I've mentioned this on Placeholders After Dark, which is like the members only version of the regular Placeholders podcast that we do on a weekly basis also today. But one of the issues with having a winter skin suit is that, when you wear, be it shorts, tights, 3/4 lengths, whatever, when you wear a lower half of your body garment that has a chamois, you need to wash it after every ride. But when you've got an upper half garment, especially like a winter jacket, you might not want to wash it after every ride, because washing it just does sort of deteriorate the garment, and especially the performance of things like water repellency and breathability and all that just is hampered the more you wash it. And with these two combined into one, you are forced to wash them. You're going to have to wash that jacket every single time you wear it. So that to me is an issue. And then finally, the pocket that you mentioned in the front that's got a pouch, and there's like a fold out windbreaker layer that sort of attaches to the front of the jacket portion of the skin suit with 3 or 4 magnetic points, if I remember correctly. It's sort of like a wind blocker. So you crest a climb, you're about to hit a descent, you can pull out this wind blocker, stick it to the front, and then at the bottom you can stuff it back in again. That's a nice idea in theory. Because it's black, I'm always wearing my high-vis vest over the top of it, so I haven't been able to... I need to actually just go out and try that intentionally someday, but yeah, because it's black, I'm always wearing something over the top of it and can't do that easily. Secondly, when I've done it in the house, not on a bike, not moving, it just doesn't feel like it's all that secure. Feels like it's going to flap a lot, and feels like it's going to be hard to stuff back into the pocket again once I've done it. Now, I'm not. That's not me passing judgment on it. I need to try it on the bike, but it just seems to me like, that's a nice idea in theory, but firstly, probably needs to be inside the jacket rather than outside, and secondly, probably isn't all that easy in function.
All right. Well, there you have it. Thermobolic, the skin suit I will never own.
I mean, they must have. They surely must have realized when they were naming this.
Yeah.
Perhaps. Yeah,
I think they've perhaps missed half the population with that name, but anyway. What I'm testing. I'm actually wrapping it up at the moment. I'm hope to be done by the time we finish recording. After we finish recording this, I hope to wrap up the review and get it posted. So it will be live by the time you're listening to this. But Trek Domane AL, they came out with a new version of it, the Gen 4, toward the end of last year from memory. And yeah, it's Trek's most budget road bike. It's their best-selling road bike platform. And yeah, I previously reviewed this platform in the Gen 3 and basically praised it, saying it was one of the best entry-level bikes, and it was incredibly versatile, incredibly fun to ride. And I even tried to buy it at the start of COVID when supply was really drying up. I thought I'd turn it into a gravel bike because it could clear 40mm tires in this cheap aluminium road frame. Really impressive. But as my review will get to, I think they screwed it up. They had a winning bike, and I think they messed it up.
How so?
They concealed the cable routing through the headset on a budget bike. So the model I'm testing is the most basic of models, and it's got mechanical disc brakes. It's got mechanical shifting, but you're talking about a bike with a fairly rudimentary aluminium frame. Like it's not. The tube's like a nicely shaped, but it's still a fairly heavy bike. But it's got cheap disc brakes. It's got Shimano Claris shifting, which is 8-speed. It's got a square taper crank that flexes when you're out of the saddle because it's you can hear it against the front derailleur flexing. it's all the touch points are nice, but it's a 10.5 kilogram road bike before pedals, and I kind of just feel like if they'd kept the cable routing outside of the headset, the brakes and the shifting might work a bit more smoothly, and it wouldn't cost hundreds of dollars to service if or when the headset bearing needs replacing on a bike like this. So once again, I'm reminded that I'm all fine with bikes with integrated headset cabling in a market that can afford the service costs, and namely in a market that can afford to have electronic wireless shifting. So at that point, you really only have brake hoses to contend with. I'm really not okay with the use of hiding the cables for aesthetic reasons when you've got 4 mechanical cables running through it, just rubbing away and just causing all sorts of headaches for mechanics down the road, and obviously increased service bills for a person that arguably can't afford the increased service bill because they're buying an entry-level bike. So yeah, there you have it. I'm a little saddened by this bike.
Yeah, as much as I agree with you, I kind of do have to wonder, though, our track kind of damned that they do and damned that they don't here, and that
sure,
time and time again, regardless of who I speak to, what most riders seem to want is the clean front end. And you try to sort of say, do you realize this and do you realize that? And
So the latest Specialized LA, which again, I've got a review of this online. I reviewed the LA Sport. They didn't go this way. They actually kept the cables external of the headset, and I praise them for that. And again, it's an entry-level bike that will be running mechanical shifting. Some run mechanical brakes. And in that situation, it just makes sense. Yes, it's not as pretty, but I think Specialized actually took the practical route as opposed to trying to take the sales-led route, which is to have a high-end looking bike that sacrifices function. So yeah, that said, I only tested the cheapest version because that was all that was available in Australia. I actually wanted to test I believe it's the AL4, which has Shimano Tiagra components on it. At that point, you get hydraulic disc brakes, which solves my complaints related to the mechanical brakes. And yeah, obviously you still have to contend with mechanical gear housing running through the headset, but at least you can change the inner cable without too much fuss on these because it is full-length housings. So yeah, if for those listening and that are intrigued by this bike, the AL4 is probably my pick, but the Shimano AL2 is tested left me wanting more. It's a shame because it was such a good platform. So I'm a little sad by this one.
I was going to go into a tangent about how my first ever road bike was a Trek 1000, 2003 Trek 1000. Sora 8-speed, rim brakes, obviously.
So how much, do you know how much it weighed and how much it cost?
It weighed 9.5 kilos, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And
okay. With pedals or without?
I'm going to say without, because it would have been toe straps.
Sure. Okay.
So
it's a kilogram lighter, and how much did it cost?
It cost, if I remember correctly, I can't remember if it was €500 or €600. But I do recall, so I had worked for my dad for an entire school summer holidays, like 2 months, every day, working with him. At the end of it, he had said to me, "You've worked all summer, you haven't had any pocket money or pay or whatever. What do you want for your entire summer as a treat? Now you're going back to school or whatever." And I had said, "I want one of those racing bikes with the triangular handlebars," which proves to you that time trial bikes do bring people into the sport. Because my theory is that I had seen the local triathlon club doing a 10-mile time trial. Somebody had aero bars that hooked me, and that was what I wanted. I think
it brings person into the sport.
I'm going to say it brings people. But so we had gone to, I don't know why we didn't go to the local bike shop, presumably because we didn't know of any that existed at the time, and there probably wasn't actually all that many at the time. We went the whole way to Dublin, and the Dublin city centre, into the psychological bike shop there, seen the US Postal Service team colours Trek 1000. That was the bike that I really wanted, having seen Lance Armstrong on TV, and then seen the price of it, and both of us nearly hit the floor. and promptly turned and walked out and thought €500 or €600, I can't remember exactly what it was, for a bicycle.
Yeah.
That's bonkers. And obviously can't thank him enough, because about halfway up the street, my dad turned to me and said, "Do you really want the bike?" And I said, "I really want the bike." And he went back and he bought it for me. So that
Good dad.
that changed my life right there. But
Yeah.
that in hindsight, that was a bargain by today's standards.
Well, that's the thing, right? So you nearly balked and nearly didn't get into the sport over a 500, 600 pound expense.
Euro,
This-
which would have been
Sorry,
less again.
So this bike that I'm testing is approximately double that in price, with lower level components and an extra kilogram. Like I know inflation and all that has had an impact on what things cost, but my God, like this is not welcoming people into the sport by giving them such a heavy bike that actually feels quite sluggish to ride. Unfortunately, I think disc brakes have kind of ruined the entry level point for a lot of people. It's made road bikes worse at this level. And there are some exceptions to this rule, like Cannondale. They still do their most entry level road bike with rim brakes. And I actually think that's quite smart. I think disc brakes needs to stay at a certain price point, and it can be something people get as their second bike, or if they have the budget to get there, then get there. But I really don't like this trend of forcing every person looking to get into road cycling onto disc brakes to begin with. I think it's like the headset cable routing, where it's done for aesthetics. And I think people look now at what the pros are racing, and every single pro is on disc brakes, and every high-end bike is now disc brakes, and the brands just assume that their entry-level bikes need to look the same. And I just really disagree with it.
Spoiler alert for you also, the only thing that I cared about that it was US Postal Service colours. I, as a brand new cyclist to the sport, had no idea that it wasn't carbon fibre, had no idea that it had Sora instead of Dura-Ace.
Sure.
The wheels were wheels, they were round.
Yeah.
So those things are probably the disc brakes and the internal cable routing are things that you can probably sell on the shop floor. But when you walk into a bike shop, at least from my experience, it's the things that are recognizable are like the paint jobs and that. The other thing, and I mean, we're kind of like a broken record at this point talking about this, but that Trek 1000, I have never actually looked up the geometry of it, but I dare say it's probably got a racing friendly geometry, whereas most bikes in the entry level range now are less. There isn't really a bike that I'm aware of in the price point that offers a racing geometry.
And I'm kind of okay with that. I don't know. I think racing geometry is still kind of that second, like, yes,
I mean,
maybe
I'm sort
if
of
you're
contradicting
young
myself
and youthful,
there, that if you're walking in, you probably don't know all that much about geometry anyway. But I'm just thinking, if you wanted to get into racing, I mean, maybe it doesn't speed up how quickly you need to replace that bike, but it could. Yeah, is kind of my point.
Yeah, I think there's two ways of looking at it. Is if a middle-aged person walks into a bicycle shop and wants to buy their first road bike, then endurance geometry is probably right for them. Whereas if a teenage kid walks into a bike shop and wants to buy their first bike and probably is going to get competitive, then the endurance-based entry-level geometry is probably wrong for them.
And who does is there a correlation there between the pricing and the geometry? In terms of the teenager probably isn't.
It seems so.
Yeah.
Anyway, for more of that rant, head to escapecollective.com and find my review of the Trek de Man AAL. Ronan, do we have a PSA this week?
I was going to actually segue to it earlier during our SRAM recall discussion, but I thought we were being very time efficient, and I thought a bit of inefficiency might have been of use to us to sort of eat up the minutes that we were seemingly short of at that point. I now look at the recorder here and we're on 58 minutes already, so we should probably speed this one up, and I don't need to.
Yeah, I really struggled to move you on from the Ekoi pedals. So.
And you're really struggling to get me to actually tell you what the PSA is this week, aren't you?
Yeah.
Will I keep you in suspense any longer, or will I tell you?
Please tell me.
My PSA is lever related, UCI related, and that is just with the new lever inclination rule. a couple of videos have emerged of mechanics simply whacking the levers to get them in line and compliant with the handlebar test, the brake lever test jig. And it's just a message to say that we shouldn't be doing that with carbon bars. I mean, if you've ever tried it with alloy bars, it just doesn't work. And it works with carbon bars, but it really shouldn't be done. And that you could be just like delaminating that section,
gouging and delaminating.
That section of the handlebar where the lever is clamped to. And I mean, if we're worried about anything damaging our handlebars and potentially being dangerous, lever inclination is probably secondary to damaging the bars by just yanking the levers to straighten them up or whatever. Or, alternatively, if you're not racing UCI racing, you just want to test the inward angle, just bashing those levers in to get them to bend in. Or what's probably more likely is you've had a fall, you're standing on the side of the road, your levers are already twisted. Most people most often just sort of move them back out by force. What we really should be doing is getting out a hex key there and loosening them up, resetting them, and tightening them up correctly again. And as soon as you get home, taking off the bar tape, or not even, probably, well, I don't know, but you should at some point be checking beneath the handlebar tape to see if there's any damage done from the crash. Yeah,
absolutely. So, stop forcing things into position, I think is the takeaway with that one.
I don't know if you've seen it or not, but over the weekend I shared a video last weekend of a certain two-time Slovenian Tour de France winner at an event I was at recently, just literally just whacking away at the bars over and over, the levers over and over again. And I don't know if like they'd been moved in a flight or if it was because he was at like a UCI event that he wanted to get his lever angle correct for the photos, but for whatever reason, the levers had to get straightened up awfully quickly.
Oh, pug. I've got another PSA, and it's a pretty quick one, but just don't forget to turn off your... If you're into chain waxing, just don't forget to turn off your crockpot overnight. There was a report out of the UK from someone, a very good mechanic out of the UK. I won't name names, but yeah, they were waxing a chain and accidentally forgot about it and came in the morning to find a ruined bag of absolute black wax and a smoking mess. So yeah, just play it safe because crockpots, it's a slow cooker. It in theory it should be able to be left, but especially if it's on a high setting that you've turned it on to melt the wax, that will overheat and boil and can cause bodily harm and fires. So yeah, please keep in mind that if you're melting stuff in your chain, pay attention to it. Set yourself a timer, set yourself an alarm, and come back to it within an hour.
When I seen this on the run sheet, I had assumed that it was that you had forgotten about it overnight. But so apologies for blaming you in the wrong there. But it got me thinking. I usually set mine to like saute mode on the slow cooker just to speed up the process, and I know that you want to get it to like. Isn't like mid 70 degrees or so Celsius for your wax. You don't want to overheat it.
No, you don't want to boil it.
Yeah, and that was I was going to give us a third PSA for the day, is that not to boil your wax.
Yep.
And
for everyone shaking their head in disgust at the moment, just use drip lube. Drip lubes are great now. You can get wax-based drip lubes. They're fantastic. There's lots of good options. You don't need to think we're crazy.
Don't let it drip all night.
Yep. All right, let's just wrap up with a quick bit of news from around the world. Amer Sports, they listed on the New York Stock Exchange and fell a little short of their $8.7 billion ballpark valuation. They ended up having a market capitalization of $6.49 billion. So, stock prices didn't quite hit the number they wanted. Obviously, there's a little bit of disappointment there, but also can't be hugely surprising for a Chinese-owned company listing on the New York Stock Exchange that has a couple of billion in debt. So it's for those wondering how Amer Sports fits into cycling, they're best known for owning like the likes of Solomon and Arc'teryx, but they also own Envy. So Envy is now part of a publicly listed company. So yeah, hopefully they continue to grow. Obviously, they've been making moves into being a whole bike company. Now with frames and sponsoring in Pro Tour level. So yeah, it's certainly they seem to be going up and up at this point. So let's see where that one goes. Curve out of Australia, the Australian brand that are known for sort of pushing the boundaries of how far and how outback you can get with a bike. Their Walmer bar, which is originally named after the width of a popular commuting bridge in Melbourne, just because they had a handlebar that was actually wider than what the bridge was before it has now been widened due to upgrades. But yeah, they long story short, they've come out with a carbon Walmer bar. So it's available in 43, 46 and 50 millimeter widths, which are measured at the hoods. The widest one is actually 65 centimeters at the drops, which is pretty wide, but surprisingly they actually have wider in the original aluminium bar. But yeah, expect to pay 500 Australian dollars for this one, and the handlebar weighs about 304 grams in the narrowest width. So as for why you'd want it, personally, I think the main reason is better vibration absorption, better compliance versus the aluminium bar. But yeah, they're obviously lighter and more neat cable routing as well. So there you go, new product. In the UK, Ronan, returning to Manchester. Actually, I don't know if it's been to Manchester before, but returning to the UK is the BeSpoked bike show. They are coming in, June 28 to June 30 are the set dates, and it will be held in Manchester. So it took a year out of the UK. It went to Dresden, Germany last year. But yeah, coming back, returning, and it happens to coincide with the same weekend as Made Australia. I think that's it. I think we're ready to wrap up.
I'm assuming those dates coincide with the Tour de France also, which is a bit disappointing, and closely, doesn't overlap, but closely to Eurobike also, which is like first week in July next year, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
Or this year now, at this point. Which
maybe that's why they moved it out of Germany again.
Possibly, but it just means that unfortunately I won't be going, despite it being very close. Because I know I'm committed to the Tour and Eurobike.
Oh, well, hopefully we'll hear about that show then, as opposed to be able to see it. All right, Ronan, it's time to wrap up. But before we do, why should people sign up to Escape Collective?
Well, I mean, that is what keeps the lights on at this place. If you like what we do, if you like the podcast, or you like the written content that we have over on escapecollective.com, the only reason that happens is for our members, and the only reason it exists is because our members sign up. Our members are effectively our bosses here. We only write and produce content that we think you will find entertaining, and we would like to do that for as long into the future as is any way possible. And the only way for that to happen is if more of our dear listeners sign up at escapecollective.com/join.
Thank you, Ronan. All right. We'll catch you next week. Thanks for tuning in. This has been Geek Warning, and see you out there.